I've revised one of the videos that I made earlier that have to do with color, that originally focused on the color blue and water. And the idea behind it had to do with clean water, healing, struggles for clean water, the fact that water is in some way the paradigmatic element of healing, I would argue, because it's the single instigator of life on this planet, and probably our last hope. I've been thinking too about different relationships that we have with being harmed, the way that water is being harmed all around the world, but in certain places in particular. And being harmed, the metaphor, I suppose, for harm is a kind of wounding, and one could imagine that we're all born in some sense wounded or deficient, they say, though that word is troubling, I think. We have limitations, and others exceed us in certain areas. That per se is not a kind of wound, but what becomes a wound is the man's made by a community, a society, group of people, on the one that struggles with limitation. And I've been trying to explore that in my own life, and to deal honestly with certain kinds of limitations that I've pretty much, chosen to ignore because of the pain, I think, attached to admission, that one is somehow less than one's fellows. Even if that's not really true, but the perception is, of course, that there's a less there. And dealing with this issue of water and its relationship to the wound, it seems obvious to me that water is one of the things that we nourish our wounds with so that we can heal. We keep them clean, and so that new life can grow around them. And the issue that I've been dealing with specifically is dysgraphia, or a set of limitations that can be described as difficulties in linear sequencing, difficulties in letter writing, difficulties in interpretation of letric values and numeral values, and how they've played out socially in my life. But that idea of a wound, it sounds as if it's entirely negative, and I wanted to address that issue because I think there's something very important in the wounding itself that may not be obvious from what I've done with the work so far. And I'll tell a brief story that I think illustrates the value of the wound pretty clearly. And then, I may elaborate from there further. But as horrible as some of what we have witnessed in the Trump era is, I didn't feel entirely compelled to deal with it as a struggle, to engage it in a sort of non-bystander way, until there was a moment in his presidency in which, Greta Thunberg had just been, and he attacked her. And I remember feeling protective. And I think that protective empathy grew out of my own sense of what my limitations had been like and what hers, must have been like. An understanding of a feeling of having lived part of her suffering, even without knowing what it was, but being able to anticipate it, to experience it along with her because of my own wounds and pain. And I think that that shared wound, or even a different kind of wound, gives rise to empathy. And empathy doesn't necessarily lead to, but certainly can lead to, a kind of path of struggle and a refusal to allow a brother, a sister, a friend, a neighbor to suffer without coming to their aid. And I wanted to explore that idea, and hopefully I can explore that idea of the kind of meta wound that empathy might be regarded as, and what some of its potential might be.